Okay, hi guys. My name is Jake Welsh. I am the principal designer and principal brand consultant here at DEPT. And today I invite you into what should be a half an hour to 40-minute talk around how we believe at DEPT you can keep up with consumer demand. Good. So let's get going. Let's give you a background to who we are and essentially who you're talking to today. So DEPT is an agency of 1,500 people. For those who have heard of us before, we're one of the fastest growing digital agencies in the world. And for those who haven't, I'm sure many of the products that we've built, whether it be digital or through strategy or through campaigns, you've seen it, you've heard it, or you've touched it. At DEPT, we have just over 22 studios, and we're based across different locations. I'm actually calling today into this kind of remotely from our Manchester offices. Now, we do have offices based in New York, Boston, London, Paris, Zurich, Amsterdam. So we do have a huge service offering across the globe, which is obviously what makes DEPT so versatile. But today we're calling on behalf of the UK teams. So some of the brands that we support, I'm sure some of the brands that you see here you'll come to recognize, you know, from your brands such as Tesla, Netflix, through to brands like PlayStation, Formula E, and Bugaboo. We like to work with game-changing brands, whether they are startups or global brands. At DEPT, we like to make an impact. Now, one of the working philosophies that we have at DEPT is the fact that we see the world through a lens of limitless possibilities. Now, what we mean by that is that if we're not really pushing hard enough, then we're not pushing the brief hard enough, nor the project or brief that we've undertaken. Now, our core philosophy is that we achieve that by uniting three core pillars of our business, which is technology, creativity, and data. And we unite those three pillars in order to drive our clients forward and to help build and accelerate digital businesses for tomorrow. So what is today about? Today isn't about us. It's about how we can advise you, whether you are a marketer, a business owner, a commerce director, whatever kind of industry or role you undertake. It's about how we at DEPT can start to give you some forward-thinking advice on how you can start to position yourself. So as the world's fastest growing agency, we do get asked a lot of questions. And one of the most common questions that we get asked, especially today in what we would classify as testing times, is how do we keep up with consumer advancement? And it's quite a broad question because it's a question not only on behalf of the consumer, but it's more importantly a question on behalf of the brands and the companies and the clients that we support. So if we start off and kind of understand that, if we think about our daily lives, as a consumer, as a marketeer, as a digital platform, every day we are exposed to between 5,000 and 10,000 adverts. Now that's on average 7 adverts a minute, which is an enormous amount of exposure to different formats of media, whether it be through your phone, through your computer, through print. That's how much exposure that we get as individuals. And as a consumer, you've got to ask the question, in our personal lives and the consumers that we look to target, how can a consumer decide what is right for them, given the amount of scale of what they're exposed to? Because as a consumer, it's very overcrowded, it's very demanding, it's very difficult to pick out the brands that we love and the companies that we want to join hands with. But to answer that question in terms of how we keep up with consumer advancement and how customers can make the right choice, as a client consultancy, we flip that question as a transformational partner. And the question that we like to ask is, what can we do as a business to become the right choice? So whether you sell vitamins, you sell energy drinks, you sell bikes, you sell bedding, how as a business can you become the right choice for the consumer, given the amount of media and advertising that consumers are now exposed to? So to answer that question, there's a few things that we need to come to accept. And at DEPT, we're huge believers of this, in the fact that The world is changing, the way people interact, the way people live, the way people travel, and even look at us today, able to speak to people all over the world through remote ways of working. Now, what we need to come to accept is that people and consumers will only cherish a handful of brands. We as individuals, if you think about it, your favorite brands and the favorite companies, whether it be your favorite coffee brand or your favorite automotive brand, we only cherish a handful of brands. And they tend to be brands that align with our personal values. So for whatever reason, we choose these brands because they align to who and what we are as individuals. And one of the key things about consumer choice is individuality and independent thinking, because we like to choose things that we believe are original and authentic to ourselves. Now, one of the questions which I'm seeing flying around on LinkedIn and flying around on tons of different platforms at the minute, and I feel like every business, every marketeer, every digital platform owner is thinking, I don't even know where to begin. Because the question that's flying around at the minute is, what are you doing differently as a business to keep up with consumer demand? What are you doing differently? And because the world has changed at such a rapid rate, it's very difficult to answer that without making choices that are fast, that are rash, that are unjustified. It's very difficult to make these decisions with confidence. So many businesses at the minute and many individuals within businesses are a little bit like a rabbit in the headlights in terms of, well, what we do next? Do we spend more? Do we alternate? What is it that we do? And today is about how we can start to think differently and how you can start to think differently within the business that you run or operate. So the most important thing about today is that today is a workshop. It's about you taking away value. But the most important thing that I wanted to start off today is that not everything works for everyone. And not everyone needs everything. So what I want you guys to do today is take bits that work for you, leave the bits that don't, and apply it in an intuitive way to your everyday business operation. So what I wanted to start off with, which is something that we certainly discuss internally as a brand team and creative team within the business, is let's start off with the basics. So for those who haven't, and I'm sure many of you on this call today have, there's a famous book out there which is written by Simon Sinek, which is Start With Why. And many businesses who want to start to look at transformation around moving from a company into a brand will tend to start with this philosophy. And what we classify here is the golden circle. And I won't go too far into this today, but it's a fantastic starting principle of understanding how businesses operate and how brands operate. Now, many people will focus their business a lot of the time on their what. And their what essentially is your service or it's your product. So if you sell bottled water, your what is your bottled water. If you sell shoes, your what is your shoes. Your why is why you set up that business and why you sell those shoes and why you are different to the market that you are up against. The how is the middle layer, which many businesses feel comfortable triggering because that tends to be how you do what you do, whether it be the manufacturing, whether it be your culture, your teams, in many ways, how you do your what and how you do your why. Now, there's no right or wrong way to think here, but the most important thing to understand is if we want to stand out in a busy market, is it the why that's going to connect with people the most, or is it the what? Now, if we start to analyze these different approaches, there's massively differing ways of working here between these two different types of company and brand approach. A business that focuses on its what will be a very sales targeted company. Okay, it's transactional. They want the transaction and they want to sell. So the tone in their emails, the tone on their platforms, the tone across their communications is going to be very, very direct, very geared towards product. So very focused around the product itself, the price, and the features of that product. Now, what these types of companies will tend to face is because they're about transaction, these types of brands struggle to acquire customers that deliver loyalty. These types of customers jump around very quickly, no real sense of loyalty to the brand that they've purchased from, and will happily jump to another brand if the price is cheaper. On the other hand, we have brands that focus on their core values, which essentially is their why. Now, these brands will tend to be far more focused around conversation. They'll tend to be focused on building a relationship and a rapport with their target market. And what these brands tend to find is that they build a much higher sense of loyalty. Now, if we start to think about brands that fall under one, as I've mentioned before, there's no right or wrong. Brands like Boohoo have achieved, remarkable outcomes over the past 5 years. But if you think about how these brands operate, these brands have to work on a very manipulative basis in order to acquire customers. It's about fast release of products. It's about fast manipulation tactics around sales. It's about sell, and buy. And that's why if you look at brands like Boohoo and Love Holidays and PC World as an example over here in the UK, these brands are about volume and they're about transaction. And they will use every possible strategy to ensure that customers buy at a fast rate. But customers who shop at Love Holidays will quite quickly move on to the next. So it'd be Virgin or Thomas Cook. Boohoo, people will jump around into other brands within the fast trend, fashionable market. And PC World, again, if they can get it cheaper, customers will go to other places. Now, on the other hand of that, we've got other brands that focus on their why. Now, these brands that are listed, you'll start to see these brands, Huel, Nespresso, Rafa. Very, very different products, very, very different companies, but very similar philosophies. These brands focus on the meaning of their brand and the why they do what they do. If you speak to people about the favorite brands that they have, many will be able to say, I don't really know why they're my favorite brand, but they just are. And that tends to be because there's underlying values from that brand that people can associate with. Huel, about sustainability. It's built for people who can't have time to have lunch in a fast-paced working environment. People who own espresso machines, they're proud of their machines. They place them top and center of their counter, and they will talk to everybody about how good their machine is, visiting their stores and having a coffee within the Nespresso facilities. Rafa has built a community of people who feel empowered by the logo being impressed onto their fabrics or their products. Now, what you start to get a sense here of is that as a business, we've got to start to make really quite a key decision here on whether we want to focus on our what or we want to focus on our why. Now, what I want you to take away from that in some instances as a key note is that if we approach our company as a business, business is a transactional relationship. If, on the other hand, we focus on relationships and rapport, what we will tend to find as a business is that our relationships with our consumers are eternal and far more longer lasting. Now, just to use a final analogy in terms of some of the brands that are doing this exceptionally well, as I'm sure we all know who these brands are, Nike is a brand that accelerates its why incredibly well. 90% of the time in its advertising will very, very, very use a product image. It's all about empowerment of what Nike's mission is, which is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. People buy into the why. Nike don't necessarily make the best trainers, but they make people feel a certain way, which is why people will use the Nike Run app. It makes them feel part of something. Apple, on the other hand, has integrated their why and their how very, very well, because not only are they about their why in terms of disrupting the computer, technology, and hardware market, they're very transparent with their how, inviting people into their Genius bars, their stores, to browse with no pressure to buy, but just to adore and admire the Apple brand. And the final one, which is Tesla, again, a brand which is focused so predominantly on its why, is one of the most revolutionary brands and companies to launch within the last 2 decades. Tesla has not only managed to penetrate the automotive market, which so many have tried to do, what Tesla have managed to achieve is quite remarkable. Teslas are not cheap vehicles. $60,000 plus, good lines $100,000 plus, and the rest. Tesla have had huge issues with the quality and manufacture of their vehicles, from parts falling off, things breaking down, self-driving mishaps to combustion. But Tesla drivers don't mind. And Tesla drivers are patient with those mistakes because Tesla drivers buy into the philosophy of Tesla. We're on that journey with you, Tesla, and I'm proud to be on that journey with you. Whereas if you spent $100,000 on a Range Rover, there'd be queues out the door and very, very, very disgruntled customers. So these companies have built incredible mechanics to bring their consumers on a journey of believing in our why, coming on that journey, and let's focus on the product that little bit less. Now, what I want to be realistic about is that not every concept works for everybody. And start with why is a great concept, but we've got to be realistic in the sense that Apples and Teslas are not born every day, and they're very, very difficult brands to relate to. More importantly, not every company has a defined why. So what we want to do today is approach that in a bit of a new way, and a way that works very, very well for us at DEPT, and a way that works very, very well for our clients. Now, this type of methodology and process will hopefully allow you to walk away today, allowing you to think about how you connect with your markets without spending more, build better converting content and platforms, and connect with your audiences in far more intelligent ways than just throwing manipulation tactics at them and hoping that one or two are going to bite. Now, what we call this process and approach is human-first creativity crafted by data. Now, as a creative, as a brand consultant, I'm not a huge fan of the word data. I think it's very technical, it's quite scientific, I find it quite overwhelming. But if we break down what data actually is and what data actually means, it's not. On a top-level holistic view, it's people that build data, from feelings to behaviors to habits to emotions, from desires, worries, values to impulses. As a brand, that is our data. And that is the insight as a brand and as a company that we need to start to understand in order to start to make much more informed decisions and much more intelligent strategies. And what you need to ask yourself as a company today is, do you have that data? You may have a CRM, no problem. You may have a database of customers, but do you know your customer? Do you understand what drives them, stimulates them, empathizes with them? We need to understand that data in order to adapt our business through these challenging times. Now, once we start to know that data, it allows us to understand the world in which they live. It allows us to define our products, and it allows us to deliver the right time, the right message on the right medium, something which many brands struggle to articulate and to define. Now, what I want to do is talk through 3 case examples of where we believe that creativity crafted by data allows you to think smarter. So let's use an example. Let's talk about shaping your proposition around your data. Let's take what everybody owns. We don't think about it. We don't look at it. It's not the most glamorous product we're ever going to buy, but boy, do we need them. And every household has them, the thermostat. Now, if we start to take 2 comparative companies in terms of how they work and how they chose to go to market, on the left, we've got Heatmiser, and on the right, we've got Nest. And what I want to do is kind of hit you with how these brands targeted you within the first 8 seconds. And if you think we're hit with 5,000 to 10,000 adverts, 7 every minute, what is it that stood out to you the most? And what is it that penetrated your purchase decision the best? Now, this is Heatmiser's first 8 seconds to target you. Okay, these are the 4 key messages that Heatmiser decided to use. We've got illuminated keys, proximity sensors, and our thermostats are ultra slim. They're the messages that Heatmiser decided to pick out. They're the messages that we as a user will start to pick. And most importantly to question there, they've also thrown in a manipulation strategy to encourage that purchase, which is the free next day delivery. So in case you're not attracted by the product, let's throw in that manipulation strategy to see if we can encourage people through the door and to purchase. On the other hand, let's take a look at Nest. The Nest is an example that I've used for many years within the business because Nest have taken a different approach. Let's take a look at the elements and the content and the way in which Nest wanted to output its creative to us as consumers. Now, Nest, on the other hand, has gone for 4 very different messages. It remembers when you wake up. It remembers when you get home. Nest will learn your family's movements and adjust its temperature around them. And Nest also knows the seasons, so you don't have to. Now, that's a very different approach. And if we were to ask the question to everybody who's joined in today, which one would you be more inclined to purchase? I can't see a wave of hands, but we've run this in the past. Over 80 to 90% of people would choose Nest, even though the product is exactly the same thing. Now, what's remarkable about that is that Nest was 4 times the price. But price for many people was a secondary consideration. It was the brand experience and the way the product made them feel that enticed them into that purchase decision. Because for so many of us, energy is such a secondary thought. People have busy lives. I don't really know how to manage my energy. I don't really know what to do. I've got a new property. It's a completely new way of thinking. And what Nest have done, they've taken that data, they've understood who their consumer is, and they've adapted their business around it. Now, let's start to take a different angle. What, instead of shaping our proposition, we were also starting to look at shaping our relationship. How can we build a different relationship with our consumers by looking into our data? And the example that I want to use for you guys today is Johnnie Walker. Now, Johnnie Walker is, for those who don't know, is a very, very premium, very well-known and prestigious whiskey brand. Huge in the UK and huge in Europe and overseas. Now, Johnnie Walker, although a very, very prestigious brand, has had challenges. Now, what Johnnie Walker will tend to do is it will tend to embrace an older demographic. It will tend to be associated with expensive and premium associations. So Johnnie Walker sponsors things like Formula One, and it can be associated to brands such as Rolex. Now, what Johnnie Walker have also done is they've positioned themselves towards someone who really values whiskey. It's not really for the casual drinker. The casual drinker will not spend the amount that Johnnie Walker costs. And the main challenge as the business has grown is that they've struggled to engage with younger audiences, something which as a business, every business needs to be thinking about. So what decisions did Johnnie Walker have to make? Now, Johnnie Walker at this stage had 3 decisions really. One is to accept their market position, but the downside of that really is that they're not really going to move forward. The second part is that they can start to change their core product line, which really, if you think about it, affects the equity. It's the same as Rolex bringing out an everyday watch at £300. They just really wouldn't do it. And also the final option is to drive a different message. But the challenge with driving different messaging is that what you start to do is alienate our existing audience base. So there's 3 kind of angles there, but really Johnnie Walker has quite a difficult challenge to take. So what was the outcome? What Johnnie Walker did was they started to delve deep into their data. They started to understand the feelings around the audiences that they couldn't marry into. People who weren't huge whiskey drinkers, people who idealized to drink whiskey, but to be fair, they were quite intimidated by the purchase journey. People would tend to stick to the drinks that they know. People would spend money on whiskey, but not actually like the product that they bought. And this data was invaluable for Johnnie Walker to decide upon their next steps and how they could penetrate into a different market without spending more than what they would have spent in the first place. So what was the result? Johnnie Walker released a brand new product called Haig. And for many people, people don't actually know that Haig is part of the Johnnie Walker brand. Now, what Johnnie Walker did here was remarkably intelligent. They reinvented themselves without affecting their primary equity. Haig Club was born. The chief endorser on the product was David Beckham. The bottle didn't display the dark spirit. It looked like a perfume bottle. The advertising talked about from the hilltops to the cityscapes. And who says whiskey is only for cold, dark nights? We're starting to penetrate into completely new ways of working. Now, if you think about that, Johnnie Walker could have endorsed David Beckham for their core Johnnie Walker range, but that would have had a detrimental effect on their brand message. They could have tried to introduce a new product like Johnnie Walker Jr. to be cooler, smarter, savvier, but then their overall brand message would have been hugely affected and impacted. But what Johnnie Walker did, which is one of the most intelligent outcomes, is that they built a pathway to their overarching brand. Haig became a pathway for Johnnie Walker customers. It was their introductory product that encouraged the youngsters to become involved with whiskey, that whiskey wasn't an older gentleman's drink. So from that introduction, drinking Haig became habitual. When they go to the bar, they go out for a meal, it felt normal to order a whiskey on the rocks or a Haig and Coke. Now that developed confidence, and from that confidence, it allowed people to share, what are you drinking? You should try this. And younger audiences then start to uptake the Haig experience. And if Beckham says it's cool, most people are going to think that it's cool. Now, what that then starts to do is bridge a maturity path of exploration, where people who have introduced into Haig, which then becomes quite a common product, want to explore into something far greater, which is there with comfort, they will start to spend more on Johnnie Walker products. So Haig became the pathway for Johnnie Walker to embrace and acquire younger audiences and to remove previous misconceptions around the brand. Now, what's incredible about what Johnnie Walker did here, they didn't spend any more than they were going to by reinventing any Johnnie Walker product. Now, the final example that I want to go through with you guys today is how not only can we shape our proposition and how we can shape our relationships, but how through our data can we start to shape our experiences. Now, one of the brands that I want to talk you through is a brand that's very close to our hearts at DEPT, being one of our clients, is Ascot Racecourse. Now, Ascot is a brand, it's one of the most pristine racecourses within the UK. It's owned by the royal family, and it's been going for many, many decades. Now, a brand that has been trading for that long will tend to carry forward a lot of heritage, a lot of history, a lot of safety, but also a lot of fear in terms of what are our next steps. Now, the Ascot proposition in its initial kind of days was focused around heritage and history. It was focused around the horses and their breeds, the jockeys and their trainers, the terrains and their seasons, and betting and trophies. The Ascot proposition of days of old was a great proposition, and it clearly worked. But as a modern day brand, and as a brand that wanted to move forward, we really had to challenge this way of thinking, and we had to sit with Ascot and say, is that where we are today? And what percentage of that heritage do we need to carry forward? Now, the perceived understanding of the Ascot audience was that many of their consumers were competitive by nature. They came to the venue to see the best horses. They came to the event to see the best racing. And one of their biggest worries as a customer was not winning. Now, the perceived perception of the customer in reality, when we started to break that down, was very, very different. In actual fact, through research, 42% of people didn't fully understand how to bet on horses at all, with 61% betting by a horse's name. So you see a name of the fastest horse on the planet, we're going to vote for it. We don't know, we don't understand the odds. We start to go with what's our comfort zone rather than what we actually know as a reality. So when we started to delve deeper into that data, we started to actually understand the actual data was telling us around what customers wanted to experience from a day at Ascot. And in actual fact, the customers at Ascot were actually far more anxious and intimidated. They went to the race course to have a good time, to be somebody else for the day, to dress, to eat, to enjoy, to forget. And one of their biggest concerns wasn't winning, it was what to wear. So for so long, Ascot on its platforms and its content had been focusing on one way. In actual fact, the modern audience expected and desired something far, far different. So if we break down what the real Ascot proposition was, the main customers wanted to have a drink and have a good time, to be with friends, to dress to impress, to break away from real life. And what this allowed us to do at DEPT was to start to think very differently with our creative, supporting Ascot and its partners with how we can take the brand forward. Now, this was the campaign that was launched in 2018 for Royal Ascot's Like Nowhere Else campaign. And what's remarkable about this, one of the first times in Ascot's history, is look what's in the background and look what's at the forefront of the marketing collateral. We have people sipping on champagne, dressed to impress. We have afternoon tea. The horses are actually in the background because at Ascot, we know the racing will take care of itself. And our main focus now is ensuring that you as the customer gain the experience that you desired and the experience that you came for. Now, what this also allowed us to do was to develop a much clearer project roadmap, a much clearer experience roadmap around the type of technologies that Ascot should be investing into. From app technology that allowed people to see the weather the day before a race day, so we could pre-warn people maybe not to wear their best shoes, but replace them with wellies. People getting there by travel. Let's advise them on how to get there, where to park, removing anxiety of what a race day actually held. Now, this work not only developed Ascot into a completely new era from a company into a brand, but what we also saw from this within the first 6 months was record online growth, record average order value, and record opt-in data. Now, the two most important facts in front of us here isn't necessarily the revenue growth, but it's the order value and the opt-in, because what the average order value allowed us to do was to sell to customers additionally based on what we knew. So before you arrive, why not add a car park permit? Before you arrive, why not order champagne on arrival, add a picnic, invite your friends? But the final piece of data, which was really impressive, was the growth in opt-in data, because what this demonstrated was Ascot had built trust with its consumers. People were willing to give their information because they felt that they were joining something special. So we started this discussion talking around how a business can stand out in busy marketplaces and what a business kind of needs to do within these challenging times in order to do that. Now, really, we've got two options. We can focus on our what, which is to sell, or we can start to review who we are and we can start to focus on our why. Now, if we don't necessarily have a why, we can use our data to take us there. Now has never been so important to evaluate your marketing and brand proposition. When someone asks you, what are you doing differently in these difficult and challenging economic times? Don't just think spend more. Don't just think make more noise. Don't just think throw something at people. Let's evaluate what we're saying and ensure what we're saying stands out from the noise that is currently visible within these existing marketplaces. Consumers are not necessarily at this moment in time looking to transact. What consumers are looking to do is connect through trust, loyalty, and empathy. If you think about a travel brand right now, one of the hardest hit brands in the sector, people are not necessarily looking to book. So as a travel brand, we're looking to build a relationship. Let's plan our biggest holiday for next year. Let's not try and throw cheap flights at people and hope that one will stick. It's not the way. Now, what's very interesting in the news at the minute is that many, many travel brands are actually being hit quite hard in the press by the fact that they're not issuing refunds. Now, that's quite two-sided, because if their customers are not showing loyalty, why is the brand showing loyalty? The customer's quite cold, the brand can be cold. Whereas brands such as Apple, Netflix, Tesla, Huel, Nespresso, they've got far more at stake because they have a relationship and a connection with their consumers. So today we looked at things such as shaping your proposition with the likes of the thermostat. We've looked at things like shaping your relationship by looking at how different brands can develop different products to move forward. And the final one that we looked at was shaping your experience. Now, what I want you guys to take away today is to really start to rethink your marketing efforts and platforms in these times. Are you thinking as a company, or are you thinking as a forward brand? To get there, you need to understand your data. Then that will allow you to craft your strategy. And what that will allow you to do is market more intelligently. Are you selling a bed? Or are you selling well-being and sleep? Are you selling a bike? Or are we selling them a journey? And are we simply selling people clothes? Or are we selling people confidence? And these are the questions that we have to ask, whatever sector that we currently work within. Now, final quote that I wanted to finish you guys with today, and I'll welcome the board to any questions after that, is a quote that I came across a few months back, which really stood out for me, is the fact that it's never been easier for somebody to start a company. But because of this, it's never been harder to build a brand. A brand won't wash away as easily when the tide comes in. It's anchored by meaning. And what you guys have to ask yourself today, as a business, how fast would you wash away when the tide comes in? Because it's in now. And now we're starting to see the businesses that are adapting and are able to move forward through these challenging times. Again, I'd like to thank you guys for joining today. You'll see my QR code there to link up on LinkedIn should you guys have any questions away from this. At DEPT, we'd be delighted to arrange any calls away from here to talk you through your data, your creative strategies, and how we can start to think a little bit more like a brand rather than the transactional companies that seem to exist. Thank you again. Now, we've just had a couple of questions come in, which obviously are great to receive. And these questions are, the first question that we've got is, do we have a good example of a brand which has successfully changed its proposition during COVID-19? And that's a really, really good question. One of the most impressive brand transformations that we've seen over the past, I would say, 5 months is one of our brands, Money Plus. Now, Money Plus is a debt advisory company. And Money Plus, again, were struggling in the fact that they were product first. They were focused on what they did as a debt advisory firm rather than how they helped. Now, we worked with Money Plus to reposition their brand and to reposition the relationships in which they had. Now, the way that we did that was actually question Money Plus in terms of, is it debt that you help people with? Or in actual fact, Is it the fact that you help people live better? Now, what this allowed Money Plus to do was to explore different products, different areas of their business, in how actually they help their business and their people live better. Debt actually became a secondary product and not their primary, a product that many people don't really want to be associated with. Now, the second question that we've got is, what are the first steps in collecting data? Another great question. Many brands struggle with this. Collecting data is something that needs to be done in a very, very tactile way. We can't just grab data off our consumers and expect to get something. It's the equivalent of going to a restaurant and the waiter coming over with a survey mid-meal. We don't want it, we're not willing to give it. If, on the other hand, as the waiter comes over to collect the dishes, to say, well, how was your wine? How was your steak? How was the lighting? What we start to do is gather data that we can start to collate and improve our experience from it. So the first step in gathering data is understanding what type of data we want to gather. Don't get lost in the world of we need as many emails as possible, because that really these days isn't data, especially with restrictions such as GDPR. What we need to look at is tactical ways of gathering that data to build intelligent strategies around it. If anyone, again, has any further questions around data, we'd certainly love to align one of our data consultants to speak to you at any given point over the coming weeks. Now, another question that we've got is, if I want to reshape my proposition, where should I start? Now, the first thing that we need to look at there is essentially our data and why we do what we do rather than what we do. So we would work with you on a consultation to sit down and break out the business in terms of who you are and the markets that we're trying to penetrate. Then we need to understand what it is that our consumers expect and what our consumers need. That will then allow us to shape our proposition and to start thinking a little bit more intelligently. And the final question that we've got, if you want to reshape your proposition, would we be able to do that in-house? Absolutely. But all I would say with that is in-house capabilities are within the walls of the business. And when you're close to the business, it's very difficult to challenge the way you think and to offset that against how other companies are currently operating. Now, what we'd recommend is that we couldn't do what we do without internal resource and internal teams and internal knowledge. We will need you in order to shape that proposition, because you know where you want to get and you know your customers better than we do. But how we can turn that knowledge into something that's more creative and more intelligent in a cost-effective manner is certainly something in partnership we'd be able to achieve. But should a business wish to do this in-house, there are certainly steps and ways to do that, which we can advise on after this session. And that's it. So again, guys, thank you again for joining today. We hope you found this DEPT Talk Live successful. Stay safe, keep thinking differently, and we hope to hear from you guys very, very soon.